my view, the rise of AI slop is truly a symptom of ongoing problems more than like a problem in and of itself. This sort of content is only appearing because of the incentives that we've created in digital media to reward things that attract clicks, regardless of what the quality of the content is.
Hello, and welcome to the Media Copilot. It's a podcast that explores how AI is changing media, journalism, and content creation. I'm Pete Paschal, longtime tech journalist and founder of the Media Copilot, and I'm excited to bring you fascinating conversations with fellow journalists, media executives, and the people building how the business of news will work in our inevitable AI future. Today, I'm thrilled to talk to Kate Knibbs. Kate is a senior writer for Wired, and she's been at the front lines in reporting on what AI is doing to the media. Her story about how an SEO mastermind was creating content farms with AI slop by buying up formerly famous internet domains like the Hairpin, well, it was eye-opening to say the least. It set off alarm bells in the media, and it exposed what can happen when anyone can scale AI content in the name of cheap clicks. It's not as dire as all that all the time, of course. As we get more used to AI content, the ecosystem adapts, and maybe something better rises from the slop pile. Kate and I talk about that, not just the bad stuff, but also who might actually be getting AI content right. We also explore the role AI might have for journalists in the future, and if you're into the copyright issue, buckle up. We get into the weeds about the recent Thomson Reuters ruling that struck a huge blow against the fair use argument that all these AI companies rely on. Hope you enjoy the conversation, and if you do, I'd encourage you to share it with a friend or a colleague. And I'd be grateful if you'd consider subscribing to the Media Copilot newsletter as well. Links in the show notes. By the way, I've also announced a second cohort for my AI training course for PR and media professionals. It's a 6-week course filled with lots of hands-on live instruction on how to use AI tools to automate workflows, craft campaigns, and just work smarter. You can learn more and sign up for the course at mediacopilot.ai. Okay, now here's my conversation with Kate Knibbs, senior writer at Wired. Kate, welcome to the Media Copilot.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming on. I'm really excited to talk to you. For starters, I wanted to say thank you for really kicking over some of the rocks in the field of AI content and what it's doing on the internet. You've definitely been a source of inspiration for some of the newsletters I've written. Your reporting, the thing that I think about the most is the story you wrote about how like there was some SEO guy who bought up a bunch of internet domains, and one of them was the Hairpin, this blog that used to be a good blog back in the day, and now it's just full of AI slop. And that I think I read somewhere. Did you win an award for that, or was it nominated or
I
something?
was nominated, and that was enough for me. But yeah, that was a wild story to report out, and it really gave me a lot of insight into what the thinking is behind a lot of the like AI generated click farms that are popping up all around the internet.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem. I want to get into what you think of slop, how big a problem it is, and what is happening to maybe mitigate it. But really, I'd like to start with more of a 30,000 foot view of how AI is affecting content and media specifically. And the fundamental question being, like, are we on a good path, or if not a good path, like, is it a path that doesn't lead directly to hell? What is your general sense of where things are going right now?
I'm definitely extremely concerned about the future of the media writ large for a number of reasons. And in my view, the rise of AI slop is truly a symptom of ongoing problems more than like a problem in and of itself. In that this sort of content is only appearing because of the incentives that we've created in digital media to reward things that attract clicks, regardless of what the quality of the content is. Um, I'm not like a total doomer. And in many ways, I think a lot of the slop that's out there is sort of easy to ignore if you have like a baseline of like media literacy. But just the fact that it's become such an overwhelming presence in so many parts of the internet on so many major social platforms. And then there is this sort of infiltration of formerly good websites that are now filled with this is definitely all ringing alarm bells. And I'm trying to document it and I'm trying to understand, you know, how bad it is really. Like,
Mm.
so yeah, my overall thinking of this is definitely not a positive phenomenon. It's not necessarily uh a complete and total nightmare, but it is really indicative of ongoing problems with the way that the internet is set up.
Yeah, I often feel like with AI content, there's it's almost you almost want to use the term Web 3, but that's something very specific. But it's like the next thing after our current Web 2 rules that we're playing under, right? Because there's like SEO and social and how people found information was sort of figured out and then hyper optimized, and then the incentives became very clear. And now we have AI in the picture, and it's on both sides. There's probably more than two sides, but certainly on the reader side they want summarization, and on the content generation side they want to sort of make it easy to generate content. But we're still playing by these rules where, like, oh, SEO and whatever. So I feel like there's a dimension, it's not quite a dimension, but there's like this shadow world that's slowly coming into view where AI is not necessarily the thing. Maybe eventually it will be, but it's becoming a bigger part of like how people um, just get information, and it has different rules, you know. And so, if there's anything that sort of gives me hope here, it's like, you mentioned one of the things you said, like slop. I think it's ill defined, but it is like low quality. That's kind of what you said, which is right, exactly
Yeah.
right. Can AI filter for that? Can AI filter for quality? It feels like it could. In other words, like, can we fight AI with AI here? Do you think that's part of the solution?
I do think it's possible, certainly. I don't know if, for example, Google would be incentivized to do that.
Hmm.
One
Good
thing I've
point.
been thinking a lot about is I do think at some point, because it's already so easy to game search engine optimization and sort of make some money by filling websites with AI slop and have it rise through the ranks and get clicks that way. I kind of think that that will be another reason that media moves away from relying on search as um, such a vital source of
Hmm.
traffic. I say that even though search is like a hugely important source of traffic for companies to this day, and like we would be totally screwed if Google just shut off. But I do think it's going to push uh, traditional media outlets towards different business models that just aren't as reliant on SEO. Because as it stands now, I do think that SEO is basically getting swallowed up by slop.
Right. Yeah. And I think I know what you mean. It's hard to imagine a world where Google isn't the way everyone finds it. It's like the first stop for everybody, right? Although, when you think about AI and how ChatGPT is rapidly becoming almost synonymous with it for
Hmm.
a large number of people, you can kind of, in a, might be wish casting, but it is almost like you see a future where, oh, maybe Google doesn't go away entirely, but does its influence get reduced? And then these AI engines become a significant part. All this caveated, of course, like, well, Google runs a big AI engine, right? Like, and
Yeah.
it has, this is one of the things where it's like, oh yeah, maybe ChatGPT will take over, and then you realize, oh, Google has all of this network effect, this massive amount of resource, and essentially all the users of the internet already. If it can just sort of get this balance right, how could it not win this future? And in that future where it's incentivized both to have AI be successful, but also put out a good product of search. If there's any hope for anyone else, I feel like if they just don't get that tension right, which they seem to have not quite gotten right over the last couple of years, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a reason why OpenAI and Perplexity have sort of swooped in and been able to establish themselves as players in search already, despite Google's dominance. And it's because it's fairly common knowledge at this point that the Google search product has been degrading in recent years and just isn't as good. If Google search still worked really well, I don't know that Perplexity would be on the upswing that it's on.
Mm,
Like there's definitely, yes, it is hard to imagine a world where Google isn't the king of search, but like at one point there was a time that Microsoft was where Google was, and then,
right.
I don't know.
True.
So I I think that Google should not be resting on its laurels right now if it wants to maintain its dominance.
Let's talk a little bit more about slop directly, because I do think people we all kind of know what we're talking about with slop, but it's also something that's not quite defined. I actually wrote about this recently,
Mhm.
but when you think about slop and you think about how AI might be a part of content strategy, like I sort of go back to the history of this. Like you had those early experiments with CNET and some sort of disastrous outcomes with I think MSN had some bad content that was clearly not vetted, and then the whole Sports Illustrated thing. But I also feel like we're kind of past that to some extent. I think people have sort of slop aside, like the legit media companies are like, oh, okay, there needs to be a process if we're going to do this at all. And so now we have things like ESPN, right? They're doing AI generated articles. And more recently, there was a lot of talk about Quartz and their intelligence newsroom. And it got a little flack for that, but it also didn't stop doing it, right? Like, so there's clearly a subspecies. I don't know, how do you regard that? Is there any way to do AI generated content right? And is this closer to that?
I do think there's a way to do AI generated content right, and I see some, like, very clear, pockets of news that could probably benefit from it, and I know that people have been working on it. It's just thus far, I think it's been really hard to pull off. Um, I haven't really been reading ESPN or Quartz's AI, articles, so I don't feel like I could offer an evaluation that's based on, like, my
Yeah.
own experience right
I'd be
now. Like,
curious if
maybe
anyone
they're
is.
better. Yeah, I know. But I will say, frankly, if I knew that I was reading an ESPN article that was AI generated at this moment, I would trust it less just because I would be
Hmm.
wondering, did they really have an editor go through and make sure that there was nothing hallucinated in this? I don't know.
Hmm.
Like, at this moment, I definitely associate AI generated with lower quality and less reliable. Now, that doesn't mean that there isn't room for it, of course. Like, my family are really big into high school sports and local sports. And, when I was growing up, I live on the south side of Chicago in a neighborhood called Beverly. We have the Beverly Review that has some write ups of like St. Barnabas eighth grade girls basketball team, whatever.
Nice.
That newspaper has been getting less robust in recent years. And now, if
Hmm.
you want to read about what happened with the Barnabas Buckeyes game against St. John Fisher, you have no place to go. I do think I would like, and I think people in my neighborhood would like, some sort of product that maybe had an AI generated summary with the
Yeah.
stats wrapped in. And I know people have been working on stuff like that, like areas of the news that just aren't getting any coverage right now that could be, um, really enhanced by some sort of AI summary, just so people have some sort of awareness of what's going on. But I haven't seen any products that have really nailed it. I also think with like, there's so much there's so much missing right now from local news reporting just because of the perverse incentives of
Hmm.
digital media and the fact there have been mass layoffs. I would prefer to have a human be in every like city council meeting, and maybe
Hmm.
there still could be in like Chicago, but I live, a mile from me is this suburb Evergreen Park. Is there someone in the Evergreen Park meeting? Probably not. Okay, if there was a
Hmm.
product that could take a secretary's notes from a meeting and generate an AI summary and blast it out to the community, that's like an obvious public good in my mind, even if it wasn't perfect. So that's sort of where I'm thinking AI could play a role, just in sort of at least providing something where we have
Yeah.
nothing right now. But I really haven't seen any products that have been able to deliver that in a reliable way yet.
Yeah, totally. And I feel like to take an optimist view, you could see at least some of the missteps or the lower quality stuff that's happening if it's being done in good faith in terms of trying to build that something is better than nothing product and hopefully iterating and making it at getting it to a point where it passes some journalistic standard, right?
Hmm.
And then maybe we actually have something. And I think what that might even turn into is some kind of like ultra personalized product, like you mentioned sports scores for youth sports, right? Like, oh, yeah, that's like, it's usually only done by people who volunteer. I coach my daughter's basketball team, and they always call, hey, can someone just write up this stuff? And as a
Hmm.
journalist, I'm like, yeah, I can spare a few minutes, but I'm not every group has that, right? So if you could somehow sort of assign that to something that could reliably puts out something that's passable, I don't see the harm. In fact, I'd see that could be a component of a lot of different things. But like you said, it sort of fits and starts, and saying that it's as long as it's done in good faith. Like, how do you even test for that?
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Um, so moving on to, you mentioned social, right? And I know you
Hmm.
did a story on the proliferation of AI on LinkedIn, and specifically. I
Yeah.
got to confess here, I have used AI to help me write some LinkedIn posts. So maybe I'm guilty of some crime against
No,
humanity.
I mean,
Uh,
LinkedIn wants people to use LinkedIn has all these built-in tools that sort of encourage you to use AI to rewrite your post. So
do
this
they
wasn't
ever?
sort yeah, like this wasn't necessarily a piece meant to castigate anyone using those tools at all. I'm really just trying to document how widespread it is. And one thing that was really interesting when I was reporting that story out wasn't just that it was widespread, but that posts that were really picking up steam, that were being read by a lot of people were interacting with them, uh, were often written with the help of AI. I
Mm,
do think there is something very weird because, like, it does also let you use AI to generate comments. So there's, I think, a lot going on already on LinkedIn where it's like someone has put up an AI generated post, and then a bunch of people are just, it's like robots talking to
mhm.
robots is like a
Yeah.
great interest of mine. And you see it sort of happening there.
Yeah. If you end up just clicking one of those AI generated responses, like, are you better than a robot? I mean, I know you had to you select one, but come on, really?
Yeah.
Was it even worth it? Yeah. This is one of those things where, I question the product managers, and hopefully they something comes out of this. But um I do feel like there is a aspect to this that lends to a sort of normalization of AI content that may have like secondary effects in the broader sort of information ecosystem, right? So you think about LinkedIn, it's just one thing. Like, I'm sure you've seen Apple's ads for Apple Intelligence, and they all have seem to be some variation of someone struggling with something, and you sometimes it's like the trope of the doofus who can't do something right, and then they do something last second, and then Apple Intelligence makes it good for them. And I feel like that's the message that's kind of sending, is like, oh, it's totally okay to just have AI write things for you. And pretty soon, emails, texts, etc., your work is all going to start just having this aspect to it. And I think we've already sort of experienced the idea of like this sort of AI speak through ChatGPT and others. It's all kind of like this average corporate speak thing that's sort of coming out. I know they're improving the models, but I also just feel like this is creating a tide that just will be impossible to turn around, So this is kind of, I guess, where I sort of get pessimistic about the state of the information ecosystem. But I don't know. What do you think? Do the tech companies have any responsibility here to kind of like give some guidelines on when to use this? Because they just kind of thrown it out there.
I mean, sure, but I do think that there needs to be personal responsibility. And I think as a culture, we should be having these conversations. I, it's hard because I'm a writer, right? And for me, writing is thinking. Like, if we were
Yeah.
exchanging text messages, I can guarantee you my thoughts would be coming out much more articulately because that is just how I process information. It's how I think critically. I need to write. And I have this very uh, intimate relationship with writing as a journalist and writer. And like, I'm kind of a purist. Like, I don't even use an e-reader. I love print. For me, it's like viscerally upsetting to think about everyone just sort of outsourcing their thinking to
Mm.
AI. And but at the same time, I recognize not everyone is a writer. Some people hate it. Some
Mhm.
people are just not good at it. They're good at lots of other things. It's not their thing. Some people have differences in learning styles that like just make it super difficult to get thoughts out in that way. And I'm aware that these products can be super helpful to other types of people than me. So in that sense, I don't want to totally come out and say it's just a net bad for society. I don't think it is. But as someone who thinks through writing and loves words and values the written language as a way for people to get their own thoughts across, I definitely am very concerned, and I don't know what to do. Um, I also am
Mhm.
married to a high school teacher, and, like, hearing about how widespread, um, these tools, like, are in classrooms already is really sobering,
Mm.
just because it's like the point of writing a paper in high school or college, even in grad school, even PhD
Mhm.
dissertations, no hate to break it to anyone doing a PhD dissertation. The point of writing that stuff isn't so someone is going to read it. They don't have wide audiences. The point is the writing itself and what it teaches you and the skills and wisdom you gain from the writing process. And like, I just think that's all going to really get corroded if this becomes super widespread in a way that will probably have like second, third, fourth, fifth order impacts on like how smart we
Mm.
are as a culture. I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
know.
No, I
Yeah.
totally agree. And I think in terms of using AI to write, there are so many sort of dimensions to that. And I think broadly, writers who have experimented with it, it took a while to get to a point to where you are you're getting some benefit from the AI, but also to your point, like the struggle is the point. Like
Mhm.
in other words, it should be a collaborator,
Mhm.
not someone who's writing for you, and maybe someone to sort of bounce ideas off of and essentially keep you on track, but not just writing the thing for you, even though that's the most obvious use case, right? So you kind of, it takes you a while if you are a writer, if you and you're willing to do stuff with AI, it's a journey to sort of figure out how to use this thing properly.
Yeah, and
Um,
I was mainly speaking about people who are using AI to
oh
write
yeah.
for them because there is the, I met this poet named Sasha Stiles last year, and she is really into using LLMs to as like collaborative tools to
Hmm.
create poetry. There's a lot of interesting writers doing work in that space. I I'm really not talking about that. I do think that
Yeah.
there are interesting ways that you can interface with LLMs to like spark new thoughts and uh, you know learn. I haven't really checked out deep research yet, but like it also could be a great research tool. I'm
Oh,
assuming
huge.
again, I
Yeah.
haven't checked it out, but I've heard it's useful. But yeah, no, I'm mainly just talking here about like people straight up putting in some pretty
Yeah.
simple
And
prompts
all I
and
was trying
then
to say was like very few people will get there, unless you're a professional writer and you're interested in this sort of technological enhancement. So I completely take your point that for most people, there's probably going to be a general dumbing down of things because they're just going to be using this tool to bang stuff out for them. Um, all right. Well, I feel like the need to switch tracks because we're going down
sure,
sort of a pessimistic road. I'd love
sure.
to ask you about the whole copyright issue. I know there
Yeah.
was a recent story about that. We're recording this here in mid February, and there was a ruling. I know you reported on about Thomson Reuters, and it was one of the first rulings in the many copyright lawsuits, which include the New York Times and News Corp and OpenAI and all these things. But this one was a very specific case about using well you could probably summarize it better than I could, but like the using Thomson Reuters
Yes,
material to train an AI, and basically the claim it's the classic claim, fair use. This is just what a human does. They read things and they process it, and then there was that was deemed a no. Why don't you summarize it and then tell me what you think are the broad implications here?
totally. Yeah, so this case, it's interesting because this case actually isn't about Gen AI. Like the AI legal research startup Ross Intelligence that Thomson Reuters sued. I honestly, they were doing something with machine learning, but it wasn't generative AI, which is
Hmm.
important to note. So this case was actually filed in 2020, like before the Gen AI boom. Um, Thomson
Gives you a rough
Reuters.
idea of when you want. We'll probably see outcomes of the current crop of lawsuits. But anyway.
Yes, yes. No, I know. Every time I talk to people, I'm like, it's a very long process. But so Thomson Reuters is this huge media and tech conglomerate. They also own Westlaw, which is one of the major sort of like, if you're a lawyer, you know what it is. It's like a legal research tool, one of two huge ones. And Ross was basically trying to create like an AI summary product, and Thomson Reuters sued them, saying, "No, this is copyright. You trained on Westlaw's head notes, and it's copyright infringement." Ross actually went out of business while this was like
Hmm.
going through the court system, so it doesn't even exist anymore. But because of how expensive the legal fees are, and yes, so it was really interesting because originally the judge said that he couldn't rule on this. There is just so much at stake that he wanted it to go to trial. And so
Hmm.
no one was really expecting this summary judgment that he released. I was shocked to read it,
Hmm.
and he uh, ruled. So there's four factors of fair use that are usually um, what uh, you know they. Sorry,
Hmm.
I'm explaining this in a very complicated way, but
No, no, no. This is good. Like,
yeah.
we
So
love the weeds.
okay.
Please continue.
So there's four factors of fair use. And he actually ruled that Ross won for two and Thomson Reuters won for two, but the two that Thomson Reuters won were the two most important. So
Hmm.
he ended up just declaring that Thomson Reuters um, won the
Interesting.
case.
And I think one of those factors that it won was the whole idea of it being essentially a market substitute, what they
Yeah,
were
so that's the
creating.
fourth factor,
Yeah.
and yes, so and this is where, like, most of the implications are for all of the
Hmm.
generative AI lawsuits, because a lot of them, especially, like, the New York Times, they are arguing very vehemently that it's, uh the products are competing with theirs, that this is gonna damage them financially if they're allowed to continue making like summaries of New York Times news articles. So the judge found very unambiguously that Ross Intelligence's product was going to cause market harm to Westlaw. And
Hmm.
so I think, and I talked to some IP scholars about this before I wrote the piece. I think that's going to be cited repeatedly. There's like, I think
Hmm.
38 ongoing copyright lawsuits
Yeah, you did a
involving like,
whole
yeah.
atlas of them. I remember.
Um,
Go check it out.
I think this is going to be cited a lot going forward
Hmm.
because it's the first judgment that's directly about like a AI copyright case, even though it's not generative AI. Um, Prior to this, there was some other big landmark cases, but they weren't directly involving AI at all. So I think that this is it might not be definitively precedent setting, but it's
Hmm.
definitely going to be cited as a precedent by plaintiffs' lawyers. And yeah, I it's been so interesting because when I started writing about this, I thought that a lot of the plaintiffs had really strong moral arguments that they were making that like
Hmm.
um, might really sway public opinion, but I was very skeptical that um, they had legal arguments that would really sway judges, because the fair use doctrine in the United States is pretty robustly used. But then a few things happened, like
Yeah.
the Warhol case came through, which is like probably a subject of a whole other podcast. But recently, a lot of the AI company defendants have taken some major L's. Like, I've been
Right.
following Kadri versus Meta, which is a bunch of book authors, including Ta-Nehisi Coates and Sarah Silverman, that are alleging copyright infringement because they say Meta trained on their books. That case is not going well for Meta right now.
Mhm.
And so it's been, I I went from sort of thinking that I'd be reporting a story, sort of watching AI
Tech running
companies.
roughshod.
Yeah, and I don't feel that confident about it anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we'll see. It definitely changes things, but you're totally right. I felt the same way when a lot of these lawsuits first came to the fore, and it was you kind of see the point of the AI companies. While it is transformative, it's kind of doing what a human does because the product, the summary that it gives, is different from the inputs. In fact, it's a interpretation combination of multiple inputs, including the ones that whoever suing them about. And I also, in my view, like I looked at when the New York Times filed its lawsuit. I do feel like that lawsuit's almost a little obsolete in some ways, in that it focused a lot on regurgitation. Like it was like,
Mhm.
oh, this is like reproducing articles word for word, which is something that, yeah, bad, but it's also like not what the product's designed to do. And they seem to have like fixed it in this mostly to sort of stop doing that. Whereas I think the whole point is that, well, you shouldn't have done it in the first place, and even the transformative stuff is violative, and so it seems like that's kind of where we're going, and that this case could be like the first of, at least pointing in the direction of like, hey, let's attack this fundamental question of, is it even okay to ingest when you are transforming it? And it seems
Yeah,
like
yeah.
this is
It's
building that
definitely
probably not.
switched. When the New York Times filed and I was talking to a lot of different IP scholars about it, they were saying they thought it was a stronger case because it was focused on the outputs, as you're saying, the
Mm,
regurgitation. And now it seems like the plaintiffs are gaining a lot of steam with the argument that just training, ingesting the content is violative. Um, and yeah, it will be interesting to see how it shakes out. I really hope that, however it does, the rulings are worded in such a way. I do have worries about like the second and third level sort of fallout from rulings that would uh, decide that you couldn't ingest content, just because I think there's a lot
mm,
of web scraping that is beneficial to society, like what the Internet Archive has done on many of
mm.
its projects. Just like Common Crawl is used by a lot of researchers in a lot of valuable ways. Like there are, I mean, journalists do web
Yeah,
scraping project. It
I,
would be, it would
yeah,
definitely be a big loss to the internet if all of a sudden there were really really strict guardrails on web scraping for like non-commercial use.
yeah.
So I'm hoping that there will be very clear carve outs if that's the case.
Yeah, you definitely have me sort of thinking about this, and just one more thing about it. But the whole, you're right, because it's like there's two, but I guess there's two aspects to kind of look at when you try to apply these rules that should apply in the micro to sort of the macro level, and one is the scale, right? That
Mhm.
tech does and AI does, and so when you can scrape the entire internet versus a very being very selective, that sort of changes things. And the other thing is, um, just the market substitution thing that we sort of talked about earlier. Is that, is it actually affecting like the market that this site is operating in? I think to the extent that journalists scrape sites like looking for things like, I don't know, court rulings or product recalls, I don't know if that really does it, but we'll see. I mean, this is all going to get hopefully figured out over the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's an
Um,
exciting time to cover it for sure.
so I'm curious about you a little bit. Like, tell me, well, you cover AI. Do you use AI in your own work? I know Wired has some
No,
guidelines that they published, but is there anything that you guys do in terms of tools or workflows, or you personally?
I personally don't use AI in my work.
No.
I have used it in my personal life for fun. Like, I made my siblings a Google Notebook podcast about our group chat we had about going to Six Flags Great America that they liked. And I like made a song for my dad on Suno for his birthday. I'm like trying to play around with these tools.
Nice.
I try to play around with the tools and understand how they work and try to understand their appeal. Right now, I just frankly haven't found any tools that I think would really help my journalistic process, because my
Hmm.
journalistic process is a lot of like talking on the phone to other humans and like reading things myself. Um, I'm sure honestly I could, because I'm like a pacer freak. I'm constantly reading,
Hmm.
especially nowadays that there's all these court cases going on. If there were, maybe I could be using some tools to like help summarize decisions and stuff, but
Right.
no, I
Pacer, of
don't.
course, being the public access
Yeah.
to electronic court records. I forget exactly what it
Yes.
is.
Yes.
But yeah,
Um,
I used to hang out there a little bit myself. Uh,
I did come to this beat in an, sort of sideways way that probably explains why I'm not, like, an enthusiast for these tools. I started writing about this because I'm interested in the media and in
mhm,
the future of the internet and digital media, and not so much because I have a genuine fascination with LLMs or image generators or how they work. Like, we actually have other reporters at Wired who are much,
mhm,
more technically knowledgeable about neural networks and the tech and science behind the AI boom, and I'm more of the documenter of its impacts
mhm.
on the media and internet.
Yeah.
So,
The rubber hits the road. I am
yeah,
myself.
so that's just it's just honestly that I'm not, for a Wired reporter, I'm not the one who's always downloading the new apps, who's experimenting. That's just I'm like, I'm reading print books and like, my phone is like 7 years old. It barely works. Like, I'm not super techy. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that's exactly what I like to focus on too. What is the impact, and how does it sort of manifest in these in the media and in newsrooms? And given everything that you're looking at, and I think we started at sort of a 30,000 foot view. I'd love to take that same view and project it forward in time, and ask you to sort of think about what the future holds if trends continue. Like, what do you think your job looks like in 5 years? How are people getting their information, and to what extent is AI playing a role, if at all? I know some people think this is all just hype, not that many, but some do, and that there will be an inevitable crash. That still seems like a possibility, especially now that DeepSeek seems to have shown that there's not it's not entirely as well. Actually, I should ask you, like, what do you think that implication of that is, and then what does it mean for the future of media and AI?
I don't think that AI is all hype. I think there are obvious use cases, but I also don't think it's quite as transformative as a lot of the big boosters do. Like, I don't expect to be using AI tools in my own journalistic processes. I do expect, and this is already happening, like, um, there we use AI, to create audio versions of our work. I'm sure we'll be using it in translations and like
Hmm. It's
different
like audience
formats.
experiences. Yeah,
Yeah, and, like, I
changing those.
also
Yeah.
I should say that I also, I use AI transcription tools already all the time.
Mm, yeah.
It's, like, a huge time. So, yeah, I actually I never mind, I lied. I do use AI in my reporting process. I use AI transcription tools.
Well, that's the thing,
Um,
right? Like, as you use these tools, it just becomes, you don't even think about what they are,
yeah,
And I feel like to some extent AI will be that for journalism, and we just don't know to what extent in the future it'll be.
yeah. Um, I I do think that, and this isn't really specific to Gen AI, but just like algorithms in general impacting how we get information. Like, there is already a big push for us to do more short form vertical video.
Hmm.
I do think, I'm sure I'll be encouraged to do more of that. Like, uh,
I'll be sure
I'm
to
not
clip this bit, by the way, for my short form vertical videos that I
cool.
use to promote the podcast. This is going to be a very meta segment. Anyway, go on.
Yes. So I'm very open to experimenting with new forms, and I'm expecting to be encouraged to look beyond just the 900 to 1500 word news article or 2000 to 5000 word news features that are sort of my bread and butter. I'm trying to get more comfortable with all of these new formats and like being on camera and stuff. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know if there's going to be like an epoch shaking change because of this technology
Hmm.
any more than there already has been.
Hmm.
Like I think I don't know. It's really hard to make predictions. I wish I was
It is.
better at it.
Well, I'll make a prediction
Yeah,
in
please
that
do.
I
I need
think,
help.
well, I mean, given the nature of your work and you day after day are doing sort of the hard work of journalism, of like you say, picking up the phone and calling people, I'd say your job's safe because an AI can't do that, at least not
Mhm.
yet. I mean, yeah, we're talking about agents and whatever, but one of the things we were alluding to earlier was how AI changes an audience perception when they know it's AI, right? And so, would you ever have any kind of AI, and putting aside the far future, but that could even ever call a source and earn their trust?
Ooh.
That's impossible.
Yeah,
Humans
I'm
will be
like
doing that for at least the rest of our lifetimes. So that's my prediction. Kate Knibbs, you are safe. You're going to be doing
love
great work
that.
well into the future because you're doing the hard work of journalism. And thank you for doing it.
Thank you so much. I hope that that's true. And thank you for having me again. Like it's so fun to talk about this stuff. And
Absolutely.
yeah,
Thank you for being here and sharing your wisdom with us. Where can people find you online?
I'm on Blue Sky at Kate Knibbs Blue Sky. I don't know. Probably just Google Kate Knibbs Blue Sky, and then I'm still on X for now at Knibbs is my username. But the main place you can find me is just on Wired. We got a website. It doesn't have AI slop on it. Please check it out. We have cool articles, and I think you'll like them.
Yeah. And not only that, you also have a print edition. This is very rare these days. So
Yes, for
congratulations.
now.
Thank you again for coming, and we'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Kate Knibbs. If you like what you heard, please just take a minute to leave a rating or review for the Media Copilot in your podcast app. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Media Copilot newsletter and check out MediaCopilot.ai for our classes on AI for journalists, marketers, and content creators. Be seeing you in the future.